Hello everybody, I'm William Broome and I've just come back from an evening with James Randi at the Metro Theatre here in Sydney. And what an insightful and fascinating evening it was. For those of you who don't know, James Randi is a Canadian-born American sceptic, atheist and critical thinker, as well as a leading magician. And the evening started spectacular. It was a huge queue around the block. It was like there was a rock star there. It went right round the block, so many people, all enthusiastically waiting. And the evening started with Richard Saunders, who's been a president of Australian Skeptics. He introduced us to a film, a documentary about James Randi's life called An Honest Liar. And it spoke about the famous Carlos hoax, as well as the Alpha Project. And in particular, what I found really interesting, apart from his relationships with people like in investigations and in exposés and people like Peter Popov and Yuri Geller, it spoke about his relationship with his partner Jose, who recently got married. And it really was quite beautiful. And then Richard Saunders took us to the break. We had a very brief 10-minute interval. And in the second half, Richard Saunders came back on stage and introduced us to Lawrence Luang. And then we were introduced to James Randi. Now, Lawrence is an Australian director, writer and comedian, and for about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, he interviewed James Randi about his life. Very, very in-depth, and it really was an insight into what's going on in James Randi's life, what makes him tick, what motivates him to investigate. And above all, what I got from the evening was the importance of critical thinking and free thinking. At the end, Richard came back and he got the audience involved and they asked several questions. I think we had about 10 to 12 audience members. Very searching and probing questions. What I liked about the evening was there was nothing off limits. No holds barred. Every question was out there, including details of James Randi's relationship with Jose, which was actually quite humbling and quite emotional to see. Something about James Randi is, I've never seen him in person. I've seen him on videos. And I was wondering what he'd be like in the flesh. Would he be arrogant? Would he be overconfident? No. Very self-deprecating. Very honest. And I know it's a cliche, but very humbling too. A very humble person. And I found him quite inspirational. And one thing he said about people who do believe, and please do take this home, is not to be condescending, not to mock them, but to be understanding and to be kind. And discuss things with people. Don't make them understand, but hear their point of view and maybe try and get your view across. A very strong man, he's 86. The saddest part of the evening was right at the end, and that was quite emotional when he intimated that it could be his last ever trip to Australia. I know James Randi's not been in the best of health, and I do wish him well. And just before I go, because I've used up enough of your time, I'd just like to thank you, James Randi, personally. And thank you for having an influence on my life in terms of free thinking and critical thinking. You certainly opened up my mind, and I wish you well in whatever you do. And I know you suggested that it could be your last visit to Australia, but I really do hope that one day you do return, and it will be with your partner, Jose. James, thank you. And how remiss of me, I forgot one important vital ingredient of the evening, and that was a special guest, the Australian entrepreneur and businessman Dick Smith, who was brought on stage, who's a good friend of James Randi's and a supporter and the founder of Australian Skeptics. Dick was a vital ingredient, and of course, as they always say, you can't beat Dick. Thank you once again, and thank you, James, for a brilliant evening.